Hello and welcome to Screen Team. We are your hosts. I'm Thomas.
I'm Dylan.
And I'm Nikita. And tonight we are discussing what is horror, what is indie, and how the two combine.
We also have some special spectacles today, such as the Cry of Fear review, a visit from Slenderman, and a video created by us for your enjoyment.
Let's start with our fun feature, Guess the Ghoul. If you can name the ghoul on screen, let us know. This particular ghoul is fond of stalking his prey, causing mental distress, and often carries a giant sword.
If you know who this character is, please let us know through Twitter using our hashtag ScreamTeam.
This week's discussion is about our favourite genres here on Screen Team, those being horror, indie, and naturally indie horror. Dylan, what do you believe the horror genre is?
Well, horror, as I'm sure we've all experienced, is an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. There are many horror games and films that have influenced the genre, allowing it to be more accepted into theatres with lower age limitations. Many people watched A Nightmare on Elm Street when it was first released, and they're still scared by it today. The genre often leaves a lasting impact on its audiences, attracting them to pursue this further into scarier films and more intense games. Recently, I played a smaller horror game called Amnesia, which involves invisible monsters, traps, mazes, and puzzles, challenging the audiences and pulling them from their comfort zone. I believe this is why people watch these movies and play these games, to be pushed from their comfortable seats into the world of horror.
There's been a lot of movement on the indie genre scene lately. Many new games and movies have splashed out onto our screens. Thomas, do you find this to be true?
Yes, I do. Many mediums have begun to make indie as it is basically anything that isn't made by a mainstream company. Usually less well-known people, sometimes even complete unknowns. While they don't normally have tons of cash or resources to make it, they're also free of many constraints that come from a lot of mainstream media companies. This means that they're free to pretty much do whatever they want, and as a result can come up with some truly inspired ideas in whatever genre and medium they're exploring.
As a combined genre, the possibilities for new original ideas are endless. Games are constantly falling into this new genre. Nikita, have you found this to be true?
I have noticed a trend arising of horror games with an indie twist. Indie, as we know it, is changing by incorporating other genres to make a new and more defined medium. Some low-budget indie horror films are excellently produced, using clever, twisted plot lines and character types to shock and amaze the viewers. Splinter is an excellent example of this, a horror film which made with a low budget became a hit. Last year, many well-designed indie horror games were released, which impacted the gaming society and impressed them, including The Lone Corridor, The Survivor, and our personal favourite, Slender, The 8 Pages. It's time for the Scream Team's Top 5. This week we have a mixture of horror games, books and films. The top 5 includes number 5, I read Max Brooks' novel, The Zombie Survival Guide, where you can learn how to survive the apocalypse by following his tips, pros and cons.
At number 4, the game Dead Space 3, Zombies and Insane Cultists in Space.
At number 3, the game SCP Containment Breach is literally a giant sandbox of anxiety, with an enemy that gets closer to you as you look away from it.
At number 2, the movie Cabin in the Woods, a seemingly run-of-the-mill horror film with a very unique twist.
And finally at number 1, Left 4 Dead 2, a team-based zombie survival horror game where you play as one of 4 survivors who shoot, slash and saw their way through different levels of a safe house.
Earlier in the week, I took some time to review Cry of Fear. With mainstream horror game developers churning out disappointing experiences one after another, it was actually quite refreshing to get my hands on Cry of Fear, which is a free horror mod made by Team Psycolor.
Cry of Fear is a total conversion mod of the original Half-Life. That's right, they actually built this terrifying nightmare from the ground up using the old, reliable Gold Source engine. And don't worry, it doesn't disappoint either, with its fully fledged single-player campaign and co-op mode, which allows you to share this scare with a friend.
Some people say that building a mod off a 15-year-old engine will have its drawbacks. Well, honestly, the visuals aren't exactly up to today's standards, though they are truly impressive for what they had to work with.
We play as Simon, our hoodie-bound hero who is forced to fight off the nightmarish creatures he encounters after waking up in a dark alley. Through Simon's narrations, we learn he deals with depression and fears of isolation, which consequently are huge motifs throughout the game.
Cry of Fear is a heavily atmospheric experience. The music and ambient sounds, paired with the bleak and chilling setting of the streets of Sweden, really keep you feeling uneasy and nervous, especially when you know something is going to jump out at you.
You can tell they put a lot of effort in developing the monsters, as there is a huge variety of ghoulies hiding around every corner. The atmosphere is occasionally broken up by instances of poor dialogue and the occasional out-of-place voice acting.
Come on, we can't blame them too much. The English isn't their native language. All in all, we find a pretty solid campaign with a good story and satisfying payoff.
As far as gameplay, it's pretty standard fare. We start off using a very basic melee system which leaves a lot to be desired, though this contrasts well with the lack of weapons at the start of the game. The player feels somewhat helpless because they can barely defend themselves against the enemies, though this makes acquiring your first firearm a really satisfying and relieving event.
The game deals with some macabre subjects such as suicide, child murder and torture, though it never really comes across as being sensationalised. It's all structured in a way that makes the player feel like they're caught up in a really sick and twisted world.
Cry of Fear is a refreshing experience that seems miles ahead of today's mainstream horror scene. It has its faults, but come on people, this is a great experience for free on Steam right now. So do yourselves a favour and download it. We give this mod 7.5 out of 10.
And now let's look at this week's horror film, The Tunnel. This film is about a journalist and her film crew as they explore a series of abandoned train tunnels under Sydney when they hear that a huge water recycling plan that was going ahead is suddenly and mysteriously cancelled. Once they start investigating, however, they find out that there is something sinister lurking within the old train tunnels of Sydney.
How is this movie styled?
The movie is presented documentary style, which allows the characters to be presented in a more personal way, and it makes the experience seem more real and believable, which adds to the overall creepiness of the movie nicely. Most of the non-interview sections are done with a handheld cam, which could be a result of the movie's limited budget, but for the most part helps with the film's horror aspect.
What was the music like in the movie?
There isn't much music to speak of in the tunnel initially, but it adds to the atmosphere as the movie progresses. What music there is consists of fairly creepy background music that certainly sounds ominous and helps create an atmosphere of something unknown and oppressive looming closer and closer.
Is there anything that you didn't like about the film?
If the tunnel has one major flaw, it's that the documentary format doesn't really create much tension, at least at first. The narration of the interviewees does help create exposition, but sort of detracts from the great unknown looming sensation that permeates horror films. Knowing straight up that there are people that have lived through it kills a bit of the fear. It's the not knowing of what could happen that helps create fear. With all that said though, it does what a good horror movie should do. It shows people in an unfamiliar situation who are out of their depth, desperately struggling against an unfamiliar entity in an unfamiliar environment. We give this movie 7 out of 10.
Tweet in your thoughts to #ScreamTeam. Here on the Scream Team, we love a good scare. We're also fond of sharing these scares with our audience. So tonight, we're going to show you reactions to the nail-biting game Slender: The Arrival. Enjoy!
Oh my god. Oh fuck. Okay, well, I don't know where I'm going now. I don't think that's the right way to go.
Very hard.
Oh my god. Okay, I've had enough there. What is it gonna do when it gets to me?
few weeks ago, we decided to pay homage to the great stories we find on the internet threads, so we recreated one of the best for you to enjoy.
Oh, Jesus.
Are you looking for something?
Just need a room?
Credit card?
Okay.
You know what? I think I'll walk you to the room.
Is there anyone else on?
Slow night. There's a few people here, but they're not going to bother you. Not this late anyway.
Why doesn't that room have a number?
It's a closet.
But it's got a peephole.
Why are you so interested in the closet? It's locked anyway.
Oh.
Just drop it. Don't even look at it.
Just making conversation. Where's the room?
Enjoy your stay.
Oh. Stop. I need to check out.
What was wrong?
I couldn't sleep.
Why?
Well, I went and checked out that room.
What? When someone tells you not to do something, do you just go ahead and do it anyway?
I was just checking it out. I had a
Seriously?
I just looked through the peephole.
Ah! Might as well tell you the story now anyway. A while ago, there was a couple that stayed here. They were kind of removed from everyone else. And one night, they had this huge fight that the whole hotel could hear. They were screaming and shouting and throwing things, and then just silence. When someone did go and check on the room, they found a woman, dead, in a white dress, with her eyes gouged out. Her sockets were just red.
What?
That's about all we've got time for, unfortunately, but thank you so much for joining us on Scream Team. Be sure to tweet us your favourite segments.
And don't forget to check under your bed.